What do you make of that result? What drove the big losses, really, for the center?
So first of all, I've got to push back on your characterization of the result. It's really important to understand that the center has absolutely held in the European parliamentary elections. The polls actually, in contrast to the recent elections that have given us a surprise elsewhere in the last few days, the polls were broadly on target. The center bloc of European, the European parties has held. What has happened is that France is hit hardest by a surge in the populist right, and Macron has called a new election. But we really shouldn't overinterpret the results to say that Europe has been taken over by the far right. This is just not accurate.
Well, but certainly by the right, Tina, because the SPD, which you could consider center-left, although from the U.S. perspective is way left, right, got a worse result than the AFD. And in fact, the CDU-CSU got double what the SPD did. So if the CDU-CSU would cooperate with the AFD, it doesn't look good, and so they won't do it, the right would have almost 50% of the German vote. In France, the National Front got more than twice what Macron's party got. So certainly something is...
These aren't national elections. People vote differently in European parliamentary elections than they do in national elections, which is why Macron's move to call a snap election, this is legislative, by the way, it's not presidential, is really important. It is a big gamble. But Europe is not moving to the far right wholesale. In fact, in many countries, I'll give you some examples, in the Netherlands, in Poland, and in Sweden, for example, far right parties actually got a bit of a drubbing. So what we don't really have is a uniform trend across the 27 countries of the European Union.
How dangerous is Macron's call for snap elections? Because you've advised UK governments who have made, for example, David Cameron made a move like this, which resulted in Brexit, right? A lot of people are calling Rishi Sunak's recent call for elections July 4th a huge mistake. Does this make it look like Macron doesn't have any cards left to play?
On the contrary, or au contraire, I think that Macron's move is very gutsy. It's got everybody I know in France, French investors, on the edge of their seat. But what he has done actually has a lot of logic. He's hoping to, to really cut the, the legs out from under the national right and to call the bluff of the French people and say, okay, we heard you. You've cast a protest vote. Do you really want these guys making policy in the country, or did you just want to send a message? Because let's think about what France looks like under a far-right government.
So you think that this is the right all-in bet because he has a full house, for example? I mean, if he gets it wrong, does Marine Le Pen take over?
No, he has to serve in cohabitation together with Le Pen's party. And there's another little wrinkle here, which is that Marine Le Pen rather cleverly has put a rather charismatic and, I can say this, handsome 28-year-old fellow in charge of the party. And he has appealed to young French voters and the TikTok generation, which is an undercurrent to voting that I don't think investors tend to focus on. Will that translate into big gains? And remember, we also have 2 rounds of voting. So it's very difficult to try to compare this to the US system. And I know it's maybe seems like too much detail, but it's important not to conflate this with the UK elections either. They have the 2-round system can sort of allow people to cast a protest vote in the first round and kind of come to their senses in the second round.
It's key to get that kind of detail, and that's why we have you on, Tina. And also because, obviously we're 10 minutes away from the opening bell. We're not really a political show. We're focused on the stock market. And you were indeed the first chief global political analyst for any Wall Street bank. How do you talk to clients about the fallout this is going to have in markets?
Well, we've got to go through the probabilities and the scenarios, but I think that there is a lot more nuance than meets the eye. They're not binary outcomes. We are looking at a very crowded early July, which is unusual. If there is a big kind of macro existential question, it is whether people will elect governments that markets won't hate anymore in a more complex environment. But when it comes to wider contagion risk, and coming back to the case for EU equities and for the euro, I actually think that this reaction that we saw at the European Open is going to settle down, and that the political risk premium is going to be limited to France and probably just to a couple of sectors like financials.
All right. Really great to get some time with you, especially on such short notice. Tina, thanks so much. Tina Fordham is Fordham Global Foresight founder and geopolitical strategist.